Bear guns is one of those topics that people just can't get enough of. They love talking about bear defense and what is the right tool for the job. You know, and over the years, people have had a lot of different opinions on what constitutes a good bear defense gun. For a long time, you know, it's Alaskan guys would be known to carry shotguns, 12 gauges loaded with slugs, slung over, while they're hunting with their clients or just tromping through the brush. Obviously, big frame revolvers, very popular option. 44 Magnum sort of being the sort of the recommended load in that. Even a 357 being considered a little bit anemic. But more recently, semi-autos have really kind of captured people's imagination and become, in many ways, the go-to platform for that. And I think there are a couple of different reasons for that. One is that in general, we've kind of grown up in an era of affordable, reliable semi-autos, and people have just sort of kind of expanded their thinking to incorporate that into other kind of uses for those guns where traditionally they hadn't been. There's still a lot of old timers who don't like the idea of anything but a big old wheel gun for bear defense, but the fact of the matter is a lot of us, myself included, are carrying semis in the woods. So, for people who live out west like I do, bear defense isn't a sort of a theoretical concept. It's sort of a reality we have to deal with. I live here in Montana, and during my fall hunting season, which is right now, I'm tromping around in a lot of places that grizzlies call home. And the fact of the matter is that with the expansion of grizzlies down in the lower 48, there have been a lot more encounters between humans and grizzlies. Grizzlies have for a long time occupied just about every kind of true wild place left in this country around me here. And the sort of the extra grizzlies that are populating the area are in places that are more frequented by people. And so the number of kind of human grizzly interactions definitely seems to be on a rising trend, because every new grizzly in this ecosystem is probably in habitat that's a little more marginal in terms of pure wilderness and a little more likely to contain people, and therefore is a little more likely to lead to a conflict. So with that in mind, for a long time, the go-to semi-auto for people has been the Glock G20 10 mil. It's holds a generous amount of rounds, has a 15 round capacity, has that Glock reliability. Everybody kind of knows what to expect. And it's really sort of established itself as sort of the main pistol that people have turned to for a long time. That said, in the last couple years, we have seen a profusion of 10 millimeters in the market. There's been a little bit of a 10 mil renaissance. For a little while, the interest in 10 mils had kind of dipped, but whether the renewed interest is because of people carrying them for bear defense or for other reasons, I couldn't tell you. But the fact of the matter is that we have a lot of new contenders out there. And one of the most interesting ones in the last year is this Sig P320 XTEN Comp. Now, if you're familiar with the Sig line, there are more versions of P320 than there are crayons and color crayons in a big box. I mean, they just keep cranking these things out, and you can get a little bit lost in the mix in terms of, well, what's really relevant about one model versus another. But I'll tell you what, this pistol in particular is one that has really caught my attention and caught the attention of my fellow shooters at Outdoor Life for its utility. It is like the original 320 10 mil, but it is cut down and it includes a compensator, hence the comp portion of it. Now, compensators on these guns is a little bit of a, not necessarily a controversial issue, but there's a question of like how useful that is on these. And the fact of the matter is not all comps are created equal, and they don't behave the same either, because it really depends on the type of ammo you use. So let's dig into that just a bit. for a comp to be effective, it has to really direct the gases from the cartridge, upwards, and to help counteract that natural tendency to muzzle flip. In order for there to be enough gases to do that, you need a lot of gas. It's beneficial if the ammo is a little bit hotter, a little bit spicier. So if you have kind of low-powered, very moderate ammo, you're probably not going to see much, if any, difference shooting a compensated model of a gun versus a non-compensated model. But when you get into a sort of a higher pressure round, and some of these 10 mil, the 10 mil is certainly one of those in general, and some of the specific loads in the 10 mil family even more so, you actually do see a meaningful difference. And that's ultimately why we ended up kind of hailing this as the softest shooting stock 10 mil that we had. So it's kind of useful to say, hey, look, how does the Sig P320 XTEN Comp compare to the OG Glock G20? Well, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper look and find out. First, let's take a look at the Glock. Now, this is my Gen 4 that I've carried for many years, and full disclosure, this is a modified Glock. And it's modified specifically for the task at hand now, which is to be wilderness ready and ready to take on an encounter with a wild animal. So I took the stock Gen 4 and sent it off to American Tooling and Engraving Incorporated out in Michigan. They do beautiful work on the Glocks, and they did a couple of key upgrades. And if you're familiar with the stock Glock, some of that will be readily apparent. One, you'll see the stippling pattern around this is a 360-degree, beautifully executed, large real estate stipple job. The finger grooves have been cut down a little bit. There's two types of people in this world: those that care for the finger grooves that you see on like the Gen 4s, and those that can't stand them, which is why on the Gen 5s they got away from those. Now you can also see the stippling extends to this pad up here, which gives you an extra contact surface, and there's one on either side for enhanced control over the gun. It's got a slide serrations machined up front and up on top, so that's just for extra grip to manipulate this gun as you need. And this was not like every gun now is coming optics ready, right? They're the MOS system or other optics ready systems that different manufacturers have. Well, that was not the case with this Gen 4, and so the slide had to be machined to accommodate this acro here. And the overall effect of this is that the ergonomics of this are enhanced and the shootability is enhanced. And also things like you can see the trigger guard has been undercut and thinned out, helping you get a higher grip on that gun to help control it. And it's little touches like that that really make this a much improved version over the stock Glock G4. Now, is it fair to compare that modified Glock to this stock Sig P320? I would argue yes. When you look at the cost of these two guns, this guy is significantly more, a fair chunk more than the basic G20. But when you pay for the upgrades, these become much more kind of comparable guns. And this is one thing where Sig did a nice job. You can see they've got their sandpaper texture, which people generally like. I certainly do, in a 360-degree pattern up there. They've got sort of a thinned out trigger guard, so like it doesn't have to be machined out or modified after the fact for that nice high grip. It's got this gorgeous big deep beaver tail on there, which gives a lot of real estate for control, is very comfortable. It's got moderate grooves cut for the fingers. And like the G20, it is a striker-fired gun, but this one came ready with adapter for optics. And in this case, I'm running a loopholed Delta Point red dot on it compared to the Aimpoint Acro on this one. Now let's talk about the red dots a little bit. there's nothing wrong with this one. In fact, I like the size of this red dot. I love how generous the window is, but this isn't necessarily, I think, the optimized red dot for kind of backcountry bear use. You know, this one is an enclosed emitter. There are a number of enclosed emitters on the market, meaning that the front of it and the back of it are sealed and the red dot is on the inside there. So when you're out in the snow, in the rain, in the mud, and you know, this thing is gonna get exposed to that stuff if you're tromping around in the mountains with it, this will still function reliably. Whereas with this guy, if you get a bunch of snow jammed in there, that can block off the emitter and you are just SOL at that point. That said, you know, even an enclosed emitter isn't a, you know, it's not a cure-all for everything. When this thing gets wet and covered with snow and this back glass has that film of water on it, you get a big starburst dispersion from the red dot. So on a dry range conditions like this, we put this up, we get that nice, you know, 3.5 MOA dot that's like super easy to see in transition. When this thing is covered with, you know, snow or water, you know, it's still there, but it's not as bright and crisp nearly and as easy to use as you will find on a range. So, you know, people will talk about the advantages of an enclosed emitter. I am a fan of the enclosed emitter, but don't think that it's like kind of a cure-all for every environmental condition. It isn't. You still need to kind of be aware of it, and when you're out there carrying one of these in the wild, you've got to be cognizant of having moisture or mud or other stuff on that will affect the performance of the gun. Now, of course, Glock, you know, famous, you know, polymer frame striker fire pistol. They were kind of the innovator. They are the version of that. And the Sig is cut from the same cloth. This is also a striker fire pistol with a polymer frame. Now, as we know, there is absolutely nobody that's in love with the stock trigger on, you know, any gun configured this way. Pretty much. There are a couple of exceptions out there, nice, but you know, the trigger on this Glock and the trigger on this Sig are really nothing to write home about. Of course, you can modify them and you can change them, and there are good reasons to do that. But, you know, one thing just to bear in mind is before you make that swap, if you're actually carrying this out in these kind of conditions where you might be, you know, wearing gloves when you're hiking around and in extreme cold and stuff, you know, I think you want to be careful going with a trigger pull weight that's too light. I'm, in general, a big fan of light, crisp, clean triggers. I mean, I will knock down the trigger weight or replace the trigger at a drop of a hat. That said, when you're dealing with a gun for backcountry use where, you know, you might be transitioning it off of, you know, from one holster to a next, because one thing that's important when you're carrying these guns in the backcountry is that they've always got to be at the ready, right? You know, an encounter with a grizzly can happen in just a moment, and you don't want to be caught in a situation where, you know, this gun is on the belt of your pack, say, and you've dropped your pack and you're kind of wandering around camp, and then all of a sudden, you know, you have that encounter. So, you know, I will carry, you know, a chest holster rig with me in camp so that I can have this around with me, or, you know, in my bino harness, I will transition this from my hip into this chest rig before I take the pack off. And when you're maneuvering the gun, you know, from one retention system to another, you know, and you've got gloves and it's cold and you're tired, you know, that is the kind of situation where a too light trigger pull can really kind of work against you. So, I mean, there are great triggers, you know, so like KGM, for example, has a module for the 320 that we've used and really, really like. And in fact, I think I probably am gonna swap this out for that. But, you know, it's just something to think about before you go kind of trigger happy and go with a real light trigger on a backcountry gun. You know, just kind of weigh the pros and cons of like how the gun is actually used back there, because it's very different from just a gun you take to the range or a gun you're shooting in competition. you know, what else can we say about it? Okay, this guy, like a lot of guns, has a rail up front. It's got a Picatinny rail system. It's got three slots up there, and that's really good because bad stuff often happens in the dark. And having a light for your gun, for your bear gun, is super useful. And in fact, and in many ways is kind of, in my opinion, essential. Now, there are a lot of holsters that don't carry very well with a light on them. And so interestingly, it can be a situation where you actually find yourself adding the light on at night, you know, before you go to bed or you're in camp in the dark and taking it on and off. That is actually something that is not as crazy an idea as it sounds, just so that you can have, you know, the gun be able to be carried and in a holster system that works better usually without the light on it. So the Glock also has the rail on it, but this Gen 4 doesn't have the pick rail. It's got that single slot there. So when you're mounting a light on that, you're going to have one that is set up correctly for that proportion. And you know, there are a bunch of good lights on there. We've got this stream light, this like TLR 8 is a combination light laser, and that's what goes on my 320 XTEN Comp. It just sits on there beautifully, works really well, runs off of a single lithium battery, CR123. For the G20, you know, I've used both this X400, which is another laser light combo, which is big and beefy and very bright, and then there's this X300 Turbo, which does not have the laser, has the light. Again, very bright, very good. Both of these makers, Surefire and Streamlight, extremely good products. And, you know, so when comes time to like fully kit out your bear gun, you know, looking at a light like one of those is pretty important. Now, I think one of the reasons that the 10 mil has become sort of such a viable option for bear country use is because of the availability of appropriate ammo. You know, you can't, I mean, everybody sort of knows this, but you can't just stuff any type of ammo in your gun and call it a bear gun. You know, you need something that has a little bit more ability to penetrate and really kind of smash through bone and get deeper into the vitals of an animal than you would for defensive ammo for like kind of just personal protection that you might carry just sort of in your daily life. And there are a number of really great loads that have come out recently that sort of scratch that itch. One of the ones that I really love is this Underwood load. This is their 140 grain extreme penetrator. That's a light bullet weight for a 10 mil, but what it does is it's got this flat nosed configuration and these channels, these grooves cut into there, and this thing is just zipping out. It's got a published speed of 1,500 feet per second, and this thing is designed to use velocity to its advantage. It's a solid monometal bullet, so it's not gonna expand or upset, which is great for creating a wound channel, at least in the short term, but can be a detriment in terms of how far a projectile will penetrate, and penetration is the name of the game. So this Underwood, this high performance ammo is really one of the top contenders out there. You know, there's another way you can go is just with a big, heavy, solid bullet. This is Federal solid core ammo, and this is a hard cast bullet that's encased in their Syntec polymer coating and is designed just to kind of hold together like that other one and just like kind of smash deeply through stuff. And these are sort of two of the different types of a projectile that will work well on a bear encounter or something like that. You know, contrast that with like Nosler's stuff. This is their ASP. This is a great round for defensive purposes. 180 grain jacketed hollow point. You know, for, you know, if you carried a 10 mil for daily use or for home defense or something, this would be a great projectile to go with. It's going to behave the way you want against sort of a human shaped threat, but against a grizzly that's coming face on, all that hide, all of that bone, to penetrate deeply, this would really be a poor choice. And, you know, so that's why you've got to kind of be mindful of the ammunition selection when looking at a bear gun. But because we have this new ammunition, this is exactly why the 10 mil has become such a good and viable option. Okay, so that's a lot of context. You know, we've kind of gotten into the weeds a little bit about, you know, why these guns are configured the way they are, sort of what you want. You want the light, you want the red dot, you know, and these other sort of features. But how do they actually shoot? How do these guys shoot? Well, let's kind of take a look at that and sort of see. We'll start with the Glock here. You know, I've got some range training ammo from Winchester in here, and it would help if I put it in the right magazine. Oh, actually, speaking of which, here's another difference between these two guns. It's a very useful reminder. This Gen 4, you know, it's not bad. It's got a little bit of flare around the magazine well, you know, and those slide in fairly easily. But, you know, like most, you know, the Glock polymer stuff, that stuff kind of sticks in there. And again, it's not, to me, that's not the biggest make or break quality, but it is something about Glocks that, you know, we've known about for a long time. And when you compare the magazine profiles, you can see that the Glock is a lot fatter and stubbier. I mean, they both are double stack that kind of go down to a single stack center design, but you can see there's a lot more taper to the Sig, and you can also see in that magazine well there's a lot more flare. You know, there's a lot more generous kind of flare in the geometry of that Sig than on that Glock. And consequently, you know, when you go to insert this, it just glides right in just beautifully. That's one thing, and it also just drops free, you know, with absolutely no hesitation at all. So in terms of like kind of comparing these two from that magazine design standpoint, I think the Sig has a definite advantage. Interestingly, you know, if you look at these two guns, the Glock is a little bit longer. It's a bit bigger gun, but you can see that the Sig is deeper there, the configuration of it, and that's kind of a holdover from the old P320 design. And, you know, in terms of the weight, actually the Glock is a little bit lighter than the Sig, even though the Sig has a little bit of a smaller footprint. This guy with a loaded magazine is about like a little over 41 ounces, 41 and a half ounces, and this guy, or just over 41 ounces, and this guy is right at like 38 and a half. So there's about just a 2.5 ounce difference between these two guns is configured. And that's, you know, kind of significant because this guy, this Acro is a more beefy red dot than the Loophole. I don't know that 2.5 ounces is making a huge difference in terms of either the shootability or the carryability, but it is kind of interesting to note that the larger gun is actually slightly lighter. So anyway, enough of that. Let's shoot this bad boy and see how it behaves. So typical Glock, it still seats in there just fine. We can run the slide and, oh, timeout. One thing about these guns, safety first. I got so excited to pull the triggers, I didn't put on my shooting glasses and my Shell Shock Ear Pro. I double up on the Ear Pro, by the way. I've got the Surefire Sonic Defenders in there and this. So if I start yelling like a deaf old person, that is why. So anyway, here we are, back. Okay, Glock G20. You know, not bad to shoot, really. It's not, you know, this doesn't run like a 9mm race gun. It's got a long trigger pull, long reset. You've got to run this thing very deliberately. It barks and kicks. You know, you really want to get a nice firm grip on that, get some extra contact there, use that pad for the support thumb, bear into it, and help control that muzzle flip. You can see on the target down there, You know, I was having consistent hits, but, you know, because of the way this thing points for me, you know, my shots were tending just a little bit low and to the right, you know, as I'm kind of running this gun a little more quickly. You know, this is, you know, I have been running a 10 mil a lot recently at the range, so I'm a little kind of, you know, rusty in terms of my form, but still not bad. This thing runs, it runs reliably. It's a Glock. It shoots well, and it's comfortable. Now the Sig, oops, noticeably flatter shooting, but you know, this is one problem I have with this gun. Check this out. I'm a lefty shooter. The height of that magazine catch is notable. I've had this issue with this gun before. Now, of course, what I need to do is, this has been a test gun for us, I need to switch it to the other side. Out of deference to the righties in our world, I haven't done that. But, you know, when I get up here and I really get after it with this gun and I squeeze tight, you know, there are times when I am exerting pressure on that magazine catch, and that can lead to problems. All right, so the muzzle flip on this is noticeably less. It is definitely, you know, the red dot bounces faster back onto the target. I feel like I can run this gun quite a bit faster than the Glock. One thing that's interesting about it though is here, I don't know if we can see this. This has ambidextrous slide release there. Look how they kind of stick out though a little bit. I don't know if you can kind of catch that. You know, that is actually fairly uncomfortable on the hands. Like that's from you know, when you compare that to the Glock. So the Glock, the Gen 4, that's one of the differences between the Gen 4 and the Gen 5. This one only has the slide stop on the left side of the gun. But look at how more flush that is. Now, you know, for guys who like to run the gun by manually dropping that, you know, putting that down and going like that, the 320, that's kind of an advantage. But I would say from the shootability, from the comfort level of this, you know, the Glock is more comfortable. So that's kind of one of those little ergonomic things you'd have to sort of decide for yourself. And in fact, you know, the Sig is a little more snaggy kind of in general. You know, the takedown lever there protrudes out. The slide stop protrudes out as well. And you know, the Glock, you know, I don't think anybody would ever usually call a Glock sleek, but in the context of this, it's a little bit more sleek than the Sig. But again, from that pure shootability factor, I think the Sig, you know, definitely has the advantage over the Glock. But for me, I've got to switch that mag catch to the other side. Now, another thing that's different about this is that, well, okay, the Glock is longer, the Sig is shorter. The Sig has a compensator. Something's got to give, and what gives is barrel length. The barrel length on the Glock is 4.6 inches, you know, which has been their standard for a long time. On the Sig, you know, to accommodate this, they had to go to a 3.8 inch barrel. So you're losing a fair amount of barrel length with this system. And with that, you're going to lose some velocity. And we've already kind of measured this a little bit. You know, I was concerned about, well, are you losing so much velocity with the Sig that it's going to basically have an adverse effect on something like this Underwood ammo, you know, compared to what you might get out of the more standard length barrel on the Glock? And the answer is not really. So we've run 4 different types of ammo through this already over this Garmin chronograph here. And typically there is velocity loss with the Sig, but it's not as much as you might think. It's somewhere between 50 and 80 feet per second, depending on the load. And we'll demonstrate this right now. So I've just got 2 rounds of the Underwood loaded in each, and we'll start with the Glock here. Put those back on, get this guy going. All right, so check this out. So I've got the Glock here. We're gonna shoot 2 rounds, and oh, that didn't pick it up. All right, so 1654, 1655 with that one. So now let's take a look and see what the Sig does. Where's my Sig magazine? Where'd that bad boy go? Oh, there it is. So 1655 with the Glock, and 1567. So you can see there is that 1587. So you can see there is a bit of velocity loss there. It's not, I think, enough to really affect the terminal effectiveness of that ammo through the Sig. So I still think it's a good choice, but it's something to kind of just be aware of. So, in terms of the Sig 320 versus the Glock G20, where does this come out? All right, let's talk about ergonomics. I think from the stock standpoint, the Sig has better ergonomics. It's got that deep beaver tail. It's got a much better kind of grip angle. I mean, one thing about this that we didn't really address is the fact that, this is a more natural pointer. When I bring this gun up, and I just do sort of a standard presentation, and I get this out there, that red dot is right there. Like, there's just kind of no hesitation. I'm just on target instantly, and it's just incredibly comfortable. And so in a sort of an emergency panic situation, I think I can count on this thing to point for me incredibly naturally. The Glock, little different. The back of this has been modified a little bit. Very common modification to help with the pointability. But when this thing goes out, there still is that tendency for it to kind of point high, and you end up kind of bringing it down. Now, I've been using this enough now that I'm presenting it out, and it's working just fine for me. So it is, if you train with this and you, kind of acclimate yourself to it, you can overcome that. But I think from a pure pointability standpoint, advantage Sig. In terms of the recoil management, I would say advantage Sig. In terms of just sort of the sort of the sleekness, the lack of sort of snagginess, advantage Glock. Both of them hold 15 rounds, so it's a wash in terms of magazine capacity. I think that one issue on this is definitely the height of that mag catch. I mean, I think for kind of, range use and competition stuff, I think these kind of like slightly oversized controls are fine. I think in terms of backcountry use, it's again not something I'm quite as crazy about. In terms of mounting accessories, huge advantage to Sig. It comes optics ready with the plate. It has a very friendly 3-rail design up front. The Gen 4 does not come optics ready. You can have it milled that way aftermarket, and it's got the single Glock slot on this one. So, in terms of that, again, advantage Sig. Reliability, it's a wash. I've put a lot of rounds through both of these pistols. They have both run extraordinarily well with every bullet type, every bullet weight, every bullet make. No problem there. So anyway, that's kind of the tail of the tape. I think that, you know, personally, this Sig is a more elegant, kind of more sophisticated, more advanced 10 mil than the G20. I still think the G20 has a lot of great qualities to it. I think that with a bit of modification, like I've done here, this is an incredibly effective backcountry tool. That said, I wouldn't hesitate to carry this, assuming I flip the magazine catch on the other side, either. So, you know, Sig 320 Comp 10 versus the G20, I think we've got a new contender here. I think this guy outclasses the Glock in a couple key ways, you know, and the key way being speed of shootability, you know, the ability to get, you know, lots of rounds accurately downrange. That's super important in this thing, but this guy is right behind it. So anyway, there you have it. The Sig versus the Glock. I think it's a close race. I think the Sig is a little bit better. So who knows? We'll have to see. Maybe on the Gen 5, we'll give that a run and redo this contest another time.